What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Struggle to Strength podcast, your source for real-life application on how to turn your struggles into strengths in all things mind, muscle, and money. I am your host, Josh Levine, and I am joined here by my longtime friend and my co-host, Travis Hatch. And y'all, here's the deal. A lot of people are going to go through their life and struggle to get what they want because they're thinking with their fears, not with their rational mind. So today, in order to combat that, we speak with Terry Tucker, a SWAT Team hostage negotiator and cancer survivor, and honestly, so much more. But Terry's here to explain the 10 principles to living your most uncommon and extraordinary life, including how to overcome your fear of failure, how to be a better listener, and how to forgo your fears to believe you can achieve anything. So before we get into it, we ask that if you love this episode, as always, please give us 5 stars on Apple or a follow on Spotify. Share us on your socials. You can find me at Josh Levine Fitness, Travis at Travis Hawks Media. Links are in the show notes. That's it. Stay tuned because Terry is going to change your life for the better starting now, starting with your fears. So get your notepads ready and we'll see you inside. We looked into all of the things that you've done, and you have done a lot. And so I'm not going to list them all here, but we will put them in the show notes because I think it's fascinating for people to know, like, wow, this guy's done a lot. But I would like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to our audience and kind of explain a little bit about who you are and where you come from. And then, I'd like to get into your survival story and, we can tie into the book and some of the other amazing things that you've done in your life.
Sure, I'll kind of give you the elevator pitch, for lack of a better word. I was born and raised in Chicago. You can't tell this from looking at me or my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and I played college basketball at the Citadel. I have a brother who's 6'7" who was a pitcher for the University of Notre Dame, and then my middle brother was 6'6" and was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association, and then my dad was 6'5", so I kind of jokingly tell people that, if you sat behind our family in church growing up, there wasn't a prayer's chance you were going to see anything that was going on in front of us. So, but my 5'8" mother really kind of ruled the roost. Didn't matter how big or tall or strong we were, 5'8" mom, whatever mom said went. After I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, and I was all set to make my mark on the world with my newly obtained business administration degree. And, I look back now and realize kind of what a knucklehead I was to think I knew anything about business just because I had a degree. Fortunately, I was able to find that first job at Wendy's in their corporate headquarters in the marketing department. But unfortunately, I ended up living with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. And then to round that out, my wife and I have been married for 28 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Actually, and not the first person I've encountered who's in the Space Force. I actually have a client in the Space Force, and it sounds cool.
Yeah, you probably know more than I do because everything she does is top secret. So it's, how was work? It was good. What'd you do? I can't tell you. All right, good talking to you.
That's like me as a teenager.
Yeah. Exactly.
Classified.
Yeah, it's all classified. Well, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I can tell you, but I have to kill you, Dad.
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah. And then something tells me that, like, maybe she could. So I'd be afraid.
Yeah, she got my height. She's 6'2". She went to the Air Force Academy to play basketball. So
wow,
yeah.
That is fascinating. You are a tall family. Are all the doorways in your house like extra tall?
They are now. We built this house literally with, and it's funny because my wife is like 5'6", so every room in the house has a stool, so she can get up, into the closets and into the kitchen and into the pantry, and it's great for us, not so good for her.
Wow, that's amazing. So, as you're telling your story, I realize that, well, one, family is very important to you, of course, and it sounds like that. You stayed home to help care for your grandparents. And your parents, and it also sounds like health. There's some health issues that may have run in the family. Now, did you know that, or did you expect that you were going to encounter your own issues down the line?
There was a pretty good chance. But kind of ironically, a couple years ago, I had some genetic testing done of all 88 genes that doctors either know of or suspect cause all varieties of cancer, and I have no mutations at all in any of my genes. So from that perspective, why I've been dealing with this very rare form of melanoma for the last 9 years is kind of a mystery. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about how I got it. I mean, I have to play the cards that, we've been dealt. But yeah, I mean, two of my grandfathers died, or both of my grandfathers, two of my grandfathers, there you go, died of cancer. But it was, one of them was like a 2-pack smoker, or a 2-pack a day smoker. And it's like, well, okay, you can kind of understand that. But I learned a lot about, I'm going to have a physical when my dad got sick. I'm going to have a physical every year. I'm going to do all the testing my doctors recommend. I'd always been an athlete, so I'd been active. I was eating right. I didn't abuse drugs or alcohol. I did everything that we know to do to be healthy. And yet I got this very rare form of cancer. So I don't know why, but I have it, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. What comes to my mind is, I haven't suffered from cancer. I've suffered from a lot of surgeries and health issues throughout my life, and I feel as though if I were to be able to have expected them, then I would probably have done the same thing. I would have, kind of lived my life a little bit differently, been a little bit more careful. And now being on the other side of some of them, I feel as though my perspective on life has changed. Has your perspective on life changed?
I think to a point, and this is going to sound kind of weird, but I think cancer has made me a better person. It's made me stronger. It's made me more resilient. It's made me appreciate life more. And so, it's the old Winston Churchill quote, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War II, who said, when you're going through hell, keep going. I kind of feel like that's what I've been doing. But on the other side, there have been some positive parts of cancer. It hasn't all been negative.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Now, being able to see the positive in the negative, I think, is challenging. It's a skill that requires a lot of emotional intelligence. We had another cancer survivor on our podcast recently, and he also said the same thing. To him, and he beat testicular cancer, and he said cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. Completely changed my life. I was going nowhere, and now look at where I am. It's amazing. I'm doing things I never thought were possible, but it took a life-altering moment in order to get him into that mindset to be able to do that. Do you feel as though people are able to get to that point without a life-altering moment?
I don't know. Life makes it pretty easy to quit.
It does.
Anytime we run up against the slightest little impediment, life makes it real easy to say, I don't think I want to do that. I don't think I want to go that direction. I always tell people that we're all going to experience pain in our lives. And it doesn't have to be cancer pain or a chronic illness or anything like that. I mean, it could be you flunk a test at school, or you break up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or you don't get the promotion at work that you think you deserve. Pain is inevitable. Suffering, on the other hand, suffering's optional. Suffering's what you do with that pain. Do you take it and use it to make you stronger and tougher and more determined? Or do you wallow in it, and feel sorry for yourself and want other people to feel sorry for you? And I guess maybe I should back up. I mean, you guys are looking at me. There's no S on my chest. I don't have a cape. So, I'm a human being. I have bad days. There are days I cry. There are days I get down. There are days I feel depressed. I just don't let myself stay in that state. And really, this is all about a choice. Do you want to stay where you are, or do you want to make a choice to use that pain and move forward in your life?
I wanted to that. I think that's a really great point, and I wanted to ask you, as someone who deals with it, maybe because everybody has those issues. Everybody has bad days. They feel depressed. They get anxious. I don't know if there is anybody on the planet ever who hasn't. But I think that as someone who probably deals with the sources that cause those things on a higher level than myself. How do you deal with it? How do you get yourself out of that feeling? Is it like just being really mentally tough? Is it having a specific routine? Like, how do you deal with it?
So it's, our brains are hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort and to seek pleasure. So, I mean, we know people who, when they come up against pain, they medicate themselves. They turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol, they turn to behavior that's not productive. And so the idea is let's get away from pain. What I'm saying is just the opposite. Don't get away from it. Take it, use it, flip it inside, burn it as fuel, use it as energy to make you a stronger individual. And I know that's foreign, and it's certainly not something that if you do that, it's going to happen overnight where you're going to be, I do have an S on my chest and I fly, I can handle anything. I choose to use pain as a way to make me a better person instead of running from it or medicating myself in a way to get away from it. And I mean, someday my pain's going to end. It may end through surgery. It may end through medication. Quite frankly, it may end when I die. But if I quit, if I give up, if I give in to pain, pain will always be a part of my life.
Yep, I agree with that. And I think that the mindset around that, like Travis was kind of getting to, is it's hard to learn how to do that. I remember my one of my most recent surgeries. I was walking around with a feeding tube coming out of my face and a feeding bag on an IV pole, and one of my friends, he kept on saying, he's like, "How are you in such a good mood right now?" And I'm like, "Man, it could suck, or it could just be okay. I got to go through it one way or another. The time's gonna pass." And I think that I was only able to do that because I had developed resilience and strength through experiencing things like that over and over and over again. And I realized that there is an advantage to the adversity that I'm facing in my life. There is a strength that will come from the struggle that I'm enduring. As long as I can pay attention to what it's trying to tell me, what it's trying to teach me, then I can learn from it. But in learning how to do that, I recently came across a new term, a new theory that I think helped me get a better understanding of what was happening inside my brain when I was experiencing pain or when I was experiencing discomfort. And it sort of relates to the mental health field. It's called the polyvagal theory. And essentially there's a window of tolerance that we're comfortable in, and we're cool, we're ourselves, we communicate very effectively, we can connect with people, we understand what's happening inside our bodies. And this can happen from pain from a surgery, it can happen from anxiety, it can happen from depression. And when we're in that window of tolerance, we're good. If we go outside of it, we get into this hyper aroused state, kind of like a fight or flight. Terry, you mentioned like there are days where you feel down and depressed, there are days where you cry, and you almost like you're hyper aroused, and that's hard to manage. And from there, usually we just shut down. And when we're in these phases of this window of tolerance, this ability, this sense of being hyper aroused, and then it's just too much and we shut down. I know personally for me, there are ways that I can bring myself out of it by just being present. And, Terry, you mentioned that like cancer's made you more of a present human. It's made you appreciate life in different ways. And so you have skills that other people are still building because you had to have them, because you were forced into a position where they were a necessity. But I think being able to understand where you are in those phases, am I good right now? Am I hyper aroused? And what can I do to bring myself back into that goodness where I'm connected, I'm communicating effectively? There are a lot of skills that go into that. So do you find when you're having those rough days and you're deeper into your pain and it's a little bit harder to overcome, do you do anything to help bring yourself back into the present and to be able to actually attack the day with the tenacity that you want to?
I think there are two stories that whenever I get into this state, whenever I feel down, depressed, whatever like that, there are two stories that I remember, and they kind of dovetail with each other. And the first one was an article that I had read about a professor at Johns Hopkins University back in the 1950s who did an experiment with rats. And what he did is he put rats in a tank of water that was over their head, and he wanted to see how long they could tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as they were about ready to drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, let them rest for a while, and then he put them back in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, the rats treaded water on average for 60 hours. Now think about that.
Wow.
15 minutes the first time. That's all I can do. Oh, I'm going to drown. Boom, I'm under. Second time, 60 hours, which said to me two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives, that we need hope. We need something to look forward to, that life is going to get better. And number two, how much our bodies can handle before they ever peter out on us and stuff like that. And the second story is kind of about, I have a friend who's a former Navy SEAL, and they talk about the 40% rule, where if you don't think you can run another step or swim another lap or do another push-up, you're only at 40% of your maximum, and you still have another 60% left to give to yourself. And so whenever I get into those situations, I'm like, you know what? No, you've got so much more. You're not down. You're not at the end. You know, get up and keep moving forward. And those two things just kind of, they're always there. I always think about them. I talk about them incessantly on podcasts and things like that, because I think they're real important, because the obstacles we face in our lives, I've found, are so much of the obstacles that we put there. They don't need to be there. We just put them there because, oh, I can't do that. Yeah, you can do a whole lot more than you think you can.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that Ryan Holiday book, The Obstacle is the Way. Yep.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
Great book. And I think it is. David Goggins talks a lot about that 40% rule. You know, when you're ready to quit, when you think you can't possibly take another step, you're only 40% done. And yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think the more people practice that, the closer they can get to 100%. You know, it's like the first time, with the rat experiment, it's like the first time they weren't even 40%. 15 minutes to 60 hours, they're not even close to 40%. Second time, 60 hours. I wonder what would have happened if they had done it a third time. As you go through this stuff, you just build a level of resilience you start to wonder what's not possible. And I think that...
Yeah, you really do. And
it's important.
You know, I had one of the things I learned from all my years of sports, I started playing when I was 9, played all the way through college. And being part of a team sport is being part of something bigger than yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. And, there's so many people that, it's all about me. It's not about you. The world owes you absolutely nothing. You've got to go get and earn whatever the heck you want in life. And so I always, these people, it's all about me. No, it's all about us. And us together can do anything we put our minds to do. And that's why I kind of like, why do you want to isolate yourself? Why don't you want to get with people and get together and figure out how you can be a better human being? And I that's a question I ponder quite a bit.
Do you find that it's challenging to get people to do that? Because you've done a lot, and you've negotiated with hostages. You've done a lot. You clearly very powerful communication skills. Is it still challenging to get people to do stuff like that?
I think so. I think fear and insecurity rule a lot of people. I'm afraid, I'm insecure, don't know about that. So what's the easiest way to do? The mind likes the status quo. It's good. Just be the way you are, but you're never going to grow. You're never going to do anything if you don't get outside that status quo. It's the old Shawshank, Redemption movie about get busy living or get busy dying. If you're not growing, you're dying. So get busy living, get busy finding out the reason you were put on the face of this earth and live that reason. And if you do, at the end of your life, you're going to be a whole lot happier and you're going to have a whole lot more peace in your life.
I think that's a great point too.
I completely,
the concept of like getting busy, because I think what holds a lot of people back is being frozen because they don't know what to do. They're waiting for an answer of like, this is the thing that I can do. And I was even where my brain was going initially when I was talking, when you said like, I run towards the problems, I'm thinking like, well, what are some like hacks, what are some like actionable, like cheat codes or fast ways to like deal with, the anxiety and depression. And I think what you're saying is like, just like that rat, it's like, it's almost like just getting through it is what builds the resilience. It's not like, oh, I deal with it because like I've learned these. I mean, maybe there probably are like things that you can do, but like, I have this like specific cheat code that I do so I can get right out of that. It's not even necessarily that. It's building the resilience by just going through it. And I think like, yeah, honestly, like getting busy, obviously you want to have purpose and focus, but for a lot of people, not just dealing with the depression side of it, but even just knowing what to go after in life, they just don't do anything because they don't know what to do. But it's like, just start doing something, like anything, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like you'll figure it out as you go. And by continuing to do it and building that resilience, that's where you figure it out from. It's not by like thinking your way into the right answer. It's by like actioning your way into the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, it's kind of like what Josh was talking about before when he had the surgery and he had the tube and all that kind of stuff. I mean, basically, Josh, what you did is you embraced the suck. Yep. This sucks. I'm going to embrace that. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to run from it. I'm going to embrace it, and I'm going to use it to make me a better person. And that's exactly what you did. But when you tell people that, they kind of look at you like,
yeah.
No, I remember after my cancer ended up in my foot, and when my foot was initially operated on, I had the lymph nodes in my groin removed. I was put on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon. And what interferon, and this was just a drug to keep the disease from coming back. It wasn't a cure by any means. And my doctor said, we want you to do this. We'd like you to do this for 5 years if you can. Oh, okay, a weekly injection of interferon. Well, what interferon gave me was severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I looked at her and I'm like, so you want me to have the flu every week for 5 years? And she's like, well, I'd like that, but we'll do it for as long as your body can handle it. And so I did it for 4 years and 7 months. And I remember thinking there were days where I prayed to die. I literally prayed, please God, just take me right now. I cannot keep this up. But you certainly, you get to a point where you realize you've got to win the day. But sometimes winning the day is getting out of bed and making it to the couch. That for me, that was winning the day. So you kind of, like when people always say, I've got to get, better at whatever. I always look at them and say, don't look at it like that. Look at it like get 1% better every single day. If you do that at the end of 30 days, you're 30% better than you were. It's kind of the old, how do you eat the elephant? One bite at a time. You can't eat the elephant in its totality all at once. You have to break problems in life down. And you're right. My wife has a very good friend who's has breast cancer, and the breast cancer has come back for like the third time. And I'm being treated for my cancer at the University of Colorado hospitals. And so they can do all kinds of experimental drugs and stuff like that. She's being treated at a regional cancer hospital that can only do pre-approved or approved therapies. And she's in hospice now. And I keep saying to my wife, why don't you tell her, go to the University of Colorado. I mean, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down fighting. I'm just not going to be like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm going to die. No, I'm going down fighting.
Trying. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's It's fascinating what happens to us when we're kind of back up against the wall. And I know I purposely put myself into situations like that, obviously not health wise, but because I know how much I've learned from it. And, while you're going through it, I think, Travis, in wanting to identify what it is that I think that we should do, I think when things are taken away from us, we begin to really understand what we miss. And so, when I was going through my most recent surgery, and I was also at UC Anschutz for this, where I had my feeding tube, and I couldn't train, I couldn't work out, I couldn't even get my own groceries. I couldn't, and I was like, man, I just want to be capable again. And I that's what actually, was a catalyst for me to get into the health and fitness industry. And I knew that because I never wanted to feel that way again. Now, Terry, you've tried a lot of stuff. You've done a lot of things. Do you feel like you were looking for that passion, that purpose before? And I know you mentioned, I still don't know what I want to do, but do you feel like you were looking for that passion or that purpose? And do you feel like the struggles that you've endured have helped you find something closer to it?
I think I knew what my passion and my purpose were. I was kind of in a family situation. My grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. So was in Chicago during Prohibition, when alcohol was outlawed in the United States, during the Great Depression in the 30s, when the gangs, Al Capone and that, were shooting up the town. And he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad remembered the stories that his mom, my grandmother, told about the knock on the door. Mrs. Tucker, come with us, and your husband's been shot. And so when I said, I'd like to go into law enforcement, my dad was like, no. You're going to go to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a good job, get married, have 2.4 kids, get a house in the suburbs, live happily ever after. But that's what my dad wanted for me. That wasn't what I felt my purpose was. So when I graduated from college, as I mentioned, I lived at home for 3.5 years. My dad was dying. And so I had a choice. I should say, Dad, the heck with you. I'm going to go over here and follow my dreams, follow my purpose, follow my why. Or I'm going to defer that and help take care of you and do what you want me to do. So if you look at my first two jobs, corporate office of Wendy's in marketing and a hospital administrator, those were business jobs. And I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited till my dad died and I followed my own dreams. So I knew what my passion was. It just took me a while to get there.
Yeah, I think a lot parents can play into that pretty heavily, and I think it can be hard for people to upset those that are close to them, especially when they're in a situation like your father was. I think I probably would have done the same thing, but you have a way, it seems, of understanding what you want, going after it. And I'm curious to learn more about that. I know you've written a book that I imagine kind of covers some of these principles that you may have to chasing your dreams, pursuing your passions, the 10 principles to living your uncommon and extraordinary life. That sounds like a book everyone should read.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a book that really was born out of two stories. And one was I used to be a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas, and I had a former player that had moved to the Colorado area with her fiance, and my wife and I had dinner with them a couple times. And I remember saying to her, I'm really excited you're living close, and I can watch you find and live your purpose. And she got real quiet for a while, and then she kind of looked at me, and she's like, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the purpose you were put on the face of this earth for, and then living that purpose. So that was one conversation. And then the other one is, I had a young man in college who reached out to me and said, what do you think are the most important things I should learn to not just be successful in my job or in business, but in life overall? And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others kind of stuff. Not that those aren't important. They are incredibly important. But I wanted to see if I could go deeper, if I could, find something that might resonate in his soul, so to speak. And so I thought about it for a while, and I wrote down notes, and eventually I had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles, and I sent them to him. And then I kind of stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath this, or I've got somebody who I know whose life emulates this principle. So literally, April 2020, I had my left leg amputated. And June 2020, I started chemotherapy for the tumors in my lungs. And during that 3-month period where I was healing, I literally sat down at the computer and I built stories underneath each of the principles. And that's how the book came about. And I remember, I never had a book published before. And so when it was published, like, well, what do I do? It's like, well, I got to sell books. I got to sell books. I got to sell books. I had a best-selling author over in the United Kingdom who I had connected with, and he kind of pulled me aside and he said, Terry, you're missing the point. Your job is not to sell books. Your job is to help people. If you help people, your books will take care of themselves. And I was so glad that he said that, because I didn't write the book to make money or get famous or even get more speaking engagements. I wrote it to help people. And I knew I was onto something when I had an 87-year-old man who bought the book, read it, and then out of the blue got in touch with me and said, you know what? If I would have had those principles when I was young, I would have had a much better life.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. Now, I'm very curious to know these principles, but first I have to say, it's very interesting to hear you talk about that when you were in recovery. This is when it hit you of, I have to do this. I have to help people. I have to share my story. Because and it's interesting because I don't think it's uncommon. As you were talking about that, I'm like, man, that's exactly what I did as I was in recovery with a feeding tube coming out of my face and I'm stuck on the couch. And I was like, I don't want people to feel this way. And I want people to be able to find and pursue their passions without going through what I'm going through. And it was, like I said, it was a catalyst. And I know that when we're in that position, we have a lot of time. So there's not much we can do. But it's really interesting to hear somebody else who's been through something like that and created something powerful from it. And like you were mentioning earlier, your pain is your power, and you harnessed it and you created something incredible from it. And I just think that's an awesome thing. I think that's incredible.
Yeah, I remember laying in bed, kind of looking at the ceiling, sort of being, at a crossroads. And it was like, I have a very strong faith. And, there's kind of that old joke, when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you God talked to me. God didn't talk to me. But I talked to God. It was like, what do you want me to do now? Where do you want me to go? I just had my leg cut off. I'm like, I'm kind of limited on what I can do here. I can hobble around and stuff, but what do you want? And I really feel that, and this is going to sound kind of weird, I'm sure, but, I wrote the book, but it was inspired by something that was bigger than me, going back to, being part of team sport. It was inspired by, I'm not going to say that God said, hey, idiot, sit down at the computer and type what I tell you, what goes into your brain. But in a lot of ways, I really feel was inspired by something bigger. And Josh, kind of like you, I've got this, crap I'm going through right now, and I want to take that and use it to help other people. And yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of people say they want to do that. I'm not sure how many people actually, pull the trigger and get it done.
Yeah, it's a challenging predicament to be in. And I think a lot of people will kind of sulk in their pain. But, there are people in the world who will create power from it. And I'm really curious to know if you're willing, I'd love to learn about these 10 principles.
I'll give you some. I'm not going to give you all, though.
Buy the book for the rest of them.
Yeah, exactly. But it's fun for me as an author because each chapter is a principle, and for me, there's always one principle that resonates with the reader, whoever the reader is, and I love that. And they're not in any particular order. 2 is not any more important than number 7 or anything like that. So it's just fun for me to see which ones people kind of gravitate to. And the one I gravitate to, and I kind of mentioned it before, is the chapter that I titled Most People Think with Their Fears and Their Insecurities instead of using their minds. And I've done that. I mean, we've all probably done that. I don't want to do that. I'm saying, what are people going to say about me? You know, who cares? Who cares what people are going to say? Get in there and make it happen. There's another chapter about failing, and failing often, especially when you're young. You know, and I mean, nobody goes out to, you know, to screw up. I mean, we all want to be successful, but failing is important because we can learn from it and things like that. There's a chapter about the importance of listening. And that's something when I was a hostage negotiator, you know, as a police officer, 99.9% of what we did was face to face with people. You know, whether it was giving them a ticket for something they did or responding on a radio run for a domestic at their house, it was face to face. And you had visual clues. You know, if somebody was kind of, you know, looking around while you're talking to them, maybe they're going to run on you. Or if they're balling up their fists, maybe they're going to fight you. And you could do something about that. You could handcuff them. You could put them in your car. You could sit them down, whatever was appropriate for why you were there. But as negotiators, the person wasn't with us. They could be blocks away and we're on the phone, or we could be negotiating through a door. So we had to figure things out based on what people were saying, what they weren't saying, and how they were saying it. And we had to be very good with silence, with allowing silence to occur and not trying. We don't like silence. You know, when there's silence, we want to fill it. We want to say something. We didn't want to be the ones doing the saying. We wanted the other person, the hostage taker or the barricaded person, to do that. And the chapter talks a lot about the importance of listening, but not listening to respond, but listening to understand. And I don't think we do that a lot. You know, it's kind of like, you know, hurry up, Travis, say what you're going to say because I want to get my 2 cents in, as opposed to, oh, Travis, okay, I hear what you're saying. Why do you feel that way? And that becomes a dialogue, and we can do something with the dialogue. When we're screaming at each other, we're not going to get anything done.
Yeah, I think that listening is probably one of the hardest things. I also love the concept of failing, because I feel like in order to fail, you have to try. So try a lot of things. But I'm really fascinated in learning a little bit more about listening. I think everybody can become better listeners. You know, there's the old adage, like, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Use them. And that discomfort with silence, I mean, that can be a sales tactic. You know, it's like, don't say anything on the phone, wait for the customer to say something. And listening to understand is a very valuable tool. But how do we get better at listening? I've heard of someone once mentioned to me, like, don't even start to form the first word of your response with your lips until the other person stopped talking. Are there little tricks like that you've used to get better at listening over your career?
Yeah, I mean, people used to ask us, I don't remember when this movie came out. I remember seeing it, but I don't remember. It was called The Negotiator, and it was Samuel L. Jackson, who was this crisis negotiator, and the guy did everything, you know, and people always ask me, is that the way it's like, you know, is that the way it happens? No, that's absolutely not the way it happened. The way we negotiated was there was a primary negotiator, let's say that was me. Well, sitting right next to me and listening to everything that's being said is another negotiator, and that person's passing you notes. And then there's 3 or 4 more negotiators that are kind of out working the crowd, so to speak. You know, why are we here? What's going on? And stuff like that. And you might get a note that says, don't talk about his mother. You know, the reason that we're here because he had a fight with his mother, and his mother, you know, said something, upset him, you know, he took his wife hostage, whatever it is. So you'd get a note. Don't, you know, talk about his mother. Okay, good. But sometimes that didn't happen. Sometimes we had to go down a rabbit hole. It's like, well, let's try this and see where it goes. And what we found out is that most hostage takers or most barricaded people, if you started down a rabbit hole that had nothing to do with what was going on, they would be like, no, you idiot, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm like, okay, good, blew that, came back and try something else. And there were times where I'd spend 2 hours over here talking with somebody when the real problem was over here. And they had to burn off all this emotional energy before we could even get to the point where we're going to talk about really why we're here. But I guess this is a long-winded answer to your question. Obviously, I'm not good with silence. I've got to talk. So the overarching point in all this is trust. And it's true in any relationship. And, whether you're hostage taker, negotiator, whether it's husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, boss, subordinate, whatever it is, trust is an incredibly important thing. And we never lied to people. People would say to me, hey, I'll come out, but you got to promise me I'm not going to jail. Like, well, when you come out, you are going to go to jail, and then you try to deflect it to something that was more positive on why the person should come out. And the reason we didn't lie to people, other than we weren't very good at it, is that there might be a year from now, 2 years from now, where we're right back negotiating with that same person again. And I'll tell you, people have very, very good memories. And they'll be like, hey, 2 years ago, you lied to me. And as soon as that happens, that relationship is done. You're going to have to bring in another negotiator and have them negotiate with people. So I think for me, it was always, can I listen from a position of trust? Can I trust you? Can you trust me and feel that I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you the truth, even if that truth is really hard to listen to.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece of communication. In fact, just thinking back to a client call that a new client call that I had this morning, talking about fixing gut health issues, and I was like, man, I'm not gonna lie to you, it sucks. It's not fun, and I know that's not what they want to hear. They want the simple solution. They want it's gonna be easy. You take this pill, whatever. No matter what. I'm not going to lie to you, because then what's going to happen? You're going to sign on with me. It's going to be hard. It's going to suck. And then you're going to be pissed. It's not what I told you it was going to be. So I think that's a valuable lesson there is to speak fully from the truth. I mean, no need to sugarcoat anything. I think that's challenging for a lot of people to do.
No, you've got to,
So
it is. And you've got to have people around you that'll do that for you. If I didn't know you, Travis, but I knew the 5 people you hung around with, I could tell you a lot about you personally. And, when people get into this state and they're, they get bullied and I'd take you guys off the air if I told you all the names I was called as a policeman, but those only hurt if you own them. Those only hurt if you take those to heart and say, "Oh yeah, I am a whatever," or "I am," but they don't penetrate. They don't hurt you if you just let them bounce off. So why not surround yourself with people that are willing to tell you the truth, that are willing to say, Josh, yeah, this gut health thing, it's gonna suck, but you know what, you got to do it because it's good for you. It's something that you need to do. But how many times do we do that? And then the person gets mad at us. It's like, you told me the truth, and now I'm pissed at you because I didn't, I don't like what you said. And if you want good people around you, you've got to be willing to have them tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I think I want the kind of friends around me who are going to tell me when there's something stuck in my teeth. I'll be straight up with me. Tell them that there's something on my face, whatever. And that's honestly the simplest way to put it. That's the easiest way to know if you've got good people. You want to know if you got good people around you? Purposely get some spinach or something stuck in your teeth and just see who tells you first. That's your best friend. That's the person who's got your back. I think that's
the best man at your wedding.
Exactly, that's the best man at your wedding. But it is hard to find those people, and you want to surround yourself with them when you do. One other thing that I think I wanted to touch on is the 3 chapters that you talked about. I think are very, very important pieces for everyone to understand in order to live a successful and, like you say, an extraordinary life. The concept of thinking with your fears and not your mind, and then the concept of failing. I think these go very hand in hand. Can we talk about that a little bit? Why are people so afraid to try things when we know failure is a part of life? That's what we're afraid of? We're afraid of the failure?
I think we're afraid of what other people are going to say about us.
You're right. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of goes back to narcissism. I mean, if I do that and I screw up, then this person is going to say something, or that person, or I might embarrass myself in somebody that I like, and maybe I want to ask, whatever it is. And I know it's easy for me to sit here and say this. It's easy for us to talk about this in a vacuum when it's not us going through it. But you do. Who cares what people say? Who cares what people think? Because bottom line is, you're the one doing it, and you're the one doing. And the important word there is doing. You're the one doing it. They're just the one sitting back watching and saying, hey, you messed that up. You screwed that up and stuff like that. Yes, I think fear paralyzes us and prevents us from going forward. But I also believe, and I guess this has kind of come sort of full circle with me, that everything we need to be successful in life is already inside us. We just need to find it and pull it out and use it to our benefit. We don't need to go looking for stuff. We need to look inside sometimes, and sometimes it helps to go to somebody who, we trust and is willing to tell us the truth and say, hey, I think this is a strength for you. Our daughter was diagnosed between 7th and 8th grade with all kinds of learning disabilities, and yet got into the Air Force Academy. And, I don't care what your degree is. You get an engineering degree when you graduate from any of the service academies. Math was not her strong suit. But we always told her, play to your strengths. And her strengths were reading and writing and things like that. But she adapted her weaknesses and turned them into strengths. She learns with color. She, as a parent, you're like, turn that music off and study. Well, for her, music was a way to learn. And so you got to figure out what your strengths are, and you got to use those no matter how many people get, you're an idiot, or you're stupid, or you're dumb, or that'll never work. All the negative stuff that people have, that only hurts if you take that in and internalize it. If you let it just bounce off of you like Superman, you know what? You can do anything you want to do.
And also those people that are talking shit like that, they're not in it. They're not doing anything. They're just sitting on the sidelines.
They're not doing it.
You're the man in the arena. Are you familiar with the man in the arena? One of my favorites, it's Teddy Roosevelt. And the critics don't mean anything. You're the one going for it, doing the work, taking the risk, high risk, high reward. If you want to be successful, you've got to try. And then you got to go from trying to doing, because no one else is going to do it for you. You want to get better at it, do what it takes. But I agree. I think that we're afraid of what people are going to think. Now you talk a lot about like bouncing, like letting things bounce off you. That's a hard thing to do for a lot of people. So obviously we get better at that with practice, but is it the people we surround ourselves with? Are there things that we can, that you recommend we can do to help not take things as personally? Is it a reflection of the other people? What can we learn about that to be better about letting things bounce off? Because that can hurt sometimes.
It certainly can. And again, but it only hurts if you internalize what those people are saying, which then says, well, do you care about those people? Do you care what that person says? Well, maybe you care if your boss says, you're terrible at sales and you're a salesman. Maybe you care about that. Maybe you need to look at, well, how can I improve? But I learned very early on as a cop that, you know what, I'm going to get called all kinds of names. And that's okay. Call me anything you want. Never took it personally, because I always used to say in my mind, it was like, okay, I'm going to go home and sleep in a nice warm bed tonight. You're going to sleep on a concrete floor. Mm-hmm. Who's going to end up having a better night, me or you? So yes, and I definitely think it's the people you surround yourself with. If you surround yourself with good, decent people that want to uplift you, it doesn't matter it does matter, but those people are going to be able to tell you, hey, that guy doesn't matter. Hey, who cares what he says? You know what? You're still a good salesman, a good marketer, a good CEO, whatever you want. I always tell people at the end of your life, you're not going to be judged on what other people said or did. You're going to be judged on what you said or did. So why do you care what these people say about you? If you have a passion, if you have a purpose in your life, in your soul, in your heart, and it scares you, I'm going to tell you to do it, because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did, They're going to be the things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do those things.
I agree. It's I like to live by an oh well rather than a what if type mentality.
Yeah.
You know, if I tried and I screw up.
Oh, well, you can learn something.
Exactly.
Oh, well.
You can always learn something from oh well. What if you're like, oh man, I really wish I did that. Time's gone. It's past. Your opportunities left you. So take it while you can. But I think that's a challenging thing for a lot of people to do. But you have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to try and fail. So, man, it sounds like there's a lot of value inside this book, and even just in these few chapters, I think that it's valuable to be able to understand the concept of these things, like these titles on failing, on listening, on thinking with your mind, not your fears, but also the application. So, is there a lot of application that we can also learn from this book?
There are. There's the principle, the overriding principle, which is the chapter title. And then there are the stories about people or circumstances that either in my life or in other people's lives that exemplified those principles. So yeah, it's not just here's what it is. It's here's how people actually brought that into their lives and made a success out of that.
I think that's valuable because like in a lot of those situations, it's hard to explain. I mean, you need to be able to see how other people do these things. It's the only way that you can really get ideas. That's like when people are stressed out and you tell them to go chill out. They're like, well, how do I do that? You know, we need to be able to see how people chill out. Do you walk in the grass with your bare feet? Do you do breathing exercises? Do you just like sit on the couch, watch TV? Do you go to the gym and blow off steam? We need ideas for how we can actually accomplish that task. And I think if there are applications or examples of application in every single one of these chapters, that's massively helpful because all we need to do is we need to see what we can replicate and what we think might work for us.
Exactly. How did this person make it work for them? Exactly. And it's, a lot of I'm not famous or anything like that. So a lot of the people in the book are not, they're every man, they're every person. So it's not like, oh, that was the president of the United States. And of course he can do that. I could never do that. And, I'll tell you, I've had that a lot with my cancer journey. People are like, I could never do what you did. And I always look at them and I'm like, yeah, you're right. Because you already started from, behind the finish line. You've already decided you couldn't do it. I always think about kids that go out and party the night before a test. When I was in college, it was like, oh man, I'm going to blow this test. Why would you go into it with that attitude? Why wouldn't you go into it with, yeah, I was out partying last night, but you know what? I paid attention during the semester and I kind of understand this stuff. I'm going to do great on this test.
That's what I did.
But we don't do that. Think about it. We don't do that. We're going, oh man, I'm going to blow this test. I'm too drunk today. No, I'm going to do great on this test. Why would you set yourself up for defeat when you haven't even, started it yet? So I just, those kind of people bother me. I don't like those people in my life. I get them out of my life when you tell me, right out of the gate, you're already negative. Yeah, you're right.
That's right. That's a massive college throwback right there. Go out, party all night the night before an exam or when a paper's due. You wake up and I either got like an hour before the exam or like 2 hours to write a giant paper. And I'm like, let's go. I got this. And you know what? I did pretty well.
Good enough.
You learned early.
Yeah, I did. I don't know. I think it was a product of my procrastination. I felt like I worked really well under pressure. So apparently I purposely and subconsciously put myself under pressure a lot. Travis and I were just talking about that. We're trying to get better about this. But it works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't know. Yeah.
Exactly. You've got a skill
Exactly.
there.
It is a skill. Yep. And we're honing it. Well, Terry, man, I'm very excited about this book. I would love to be able to read it, and I know that our listeners would too. So, obviously we've had a great conversation around your cancer survivor. You've learned a lot about your passion. You've experimented with a lot of different careers. And I think that there's some valuable takeaways in this episode, but most importantly, I think is it's all wrapped up in the book. So I want to give you the opportunity to, plug yourself, tell people where they can find the book, and let us know what you got going on.
Yeah, the book can be found anywhere you can get a book online. It's in an ebook form, it's in a paperback, it's in a hardcover. You can get it at Amazon, you can get it at barnesandnoble.com, you can get it at Apple iBooks. So pretty much anywhere online, you can get a book, you can get Sustainable Excellence. I have a blog that I started in 2019 where I put up a thought for the day and kind of follow that up with a question to make you think a little bit about that thought. And then on Mondays, I put up the Monday morning motivational message, which is usually a video or a story that goes a little deeper into motivation or inspiration. And that's, my site is Motivational Check. So motivationalcheck.com will get you to that. It'll get you to my social media sites. You can leave me a message. You can actually get the book on Amazon through that site too. So motivationalcheck.com will pretty much get you everything Terry.
All right. I love it. So yeah, to everybody who's listening, I highly recommend you check out the book, check out motivationalcheck.com. There's a lot of value in understanding these processes that, people like Terry and I, unfortunately, we've endured a lot of struggle to learn a lot of these lessons. But we don't want you to have to. So if we can teach you in some way, I think this is a great first step. If you're unsure of your purpose or your passion or what you are meant to do on this earth, it sounds like we've got it laid out pretty easily here in these 10 steps. So I highly recommend everybody take it. Everybody who's continued to stick with us to this point, I really appreciate it. So thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Struggle to Strength podcast. Thank you, Terry, for sharing your story. We'll see you guys all next week.